Okay, Pandora. You can come out of your box now.
You destroyed my room!
Yeah, I was doing my Charles Foster Kane imitation.
Welcome to week 71 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We finished episode 342, which originally aired Monday, December 2nd, 1985. And I guess the sweeps might be done. Too late for a wedding, I think. Mary and Mark reminisce about high school and their first kiss, after which Mary promptly went into the seminary, or the nunnery. Actually, she didn't say promptly. They kind of implied that maybe 1 or 2 years had gone by without her kissing anyone and then going into the nunnery. But they definitely only had the one kiss.
I think it's worth remembering, too, that these characters are all probably pretty young, like younger than we think they are, and probably younger than the actors. So.
He urges Mary not to quit her job just because of Mason. Mason tells Gina he's going to search her room for the will. She hides the pills that she used to drug Eden in the flower pot. And when Mason comes in, he locks her in the closet. She keeps shouting to be let out, and at one point to shut her up, he throws the flower pot at the closet door and it smashes, revealing the pills which he pockets. He then finds some scissors and tape and thinks that Gina must have taped the will to something, and very quickly finds the painting that the will is behind. He says the line that I remembered all these years, where there's a will, there's a way. And then he releases Gina, and they go downstairs where he burns the will. And just as Mary and Mark arrives, he tells her he's going to use the pills to destroy her. So I was thinking about this a little bit. I think he's going to use the pills to help Santana take Brandon away from Gina by claiming that Gina's back on the pills. And Gina's defense can't be, oh no, I was just using these to poison Eden. No. So she doesn't really have a good excuse for having those pills, especially when the date on them will be fairly recent. She can't claim they were old, and obviously he can say, oh, look, several of them have been taken since the date this prescription was filled.
Well, I do trust Gina to be creative and resourceful if she is confronted with this problem. But, I mean, it would be interesting to see Santana get Brandon, at least for a little while. Like, it would be kind of interesting to switch up those dynamics a bit.
We've seen Gina a couple days in a row now, so I think they've brought her back for some reason. So. And her main reason is usually Brandon. In fact, her storyline today revolves around Brandon. Cruz runs into Kirk at the Orient Express, and Kirk gives Cruz the engagement ring back that he gave Eden and says, she asked me to be the ring bearer. I also have a message for you. Eden and I are getting married as soon as possible. Cruz almost knocks Kirk out at this point, but luckily Pearl walks in and stops him as he lunges towards Kirk. Then later, Cruz and Pearl discuss whether or not it could possibly be true that Eden's agreed to marry Kirk. Pearl thinks that Kirk wouldn't make up a story about getting married because it would be too easy to check. Kirk, meanwhile, is meeting with Judge Raleigh, who was recommended to him by Jack Lee, and the judge has been chatting with Jack Lee. So Jack Lee is still merrily pulling strings in the background. Kirk says, I want to get married. My fiancée and I want to get married as soon as possible. She's on a business trip right now, but as soon as she comes back, we want to get married without any blood test or 3-day waiting period. Because we're jetting off to Alaska immediately afterwards. And Judge Raleigh says, well, for Jack Lee's son, we can do anything. So, I think Kirk realizes the sweeps were coming to an end and decided he quickly needed to marry Eden tomorrow. But it's not clear to him where Eden is either, it turns out.
No.
He has to call someone and say, find Eden immediately. So, it's maybe not a business trip that she's on. Pearl tells Cruz that, he's been eavesdropping and that Kirk is meeting with Judge Raleigh. So Cruz wants to investigate that. And Pearl says to him, How many times are you going to slap yourself in the head with the same old fish? Due to the blocked roads, Sophia and Brandon end up returning to the camp. Lionel gets to the fire station, but they won't let him pass. And he tells them his car's broken down, but really it's not. We hear a guy on the radio with the fire guy saying that someone who's trying to transport 3 horses needs some help. Next thing we see Lionel on the road, and he actually runs into the guy who's riding one of the horses and towing 2 of the others on a rope. And Lionel offers to buy one of the horses so he can go and rescue his grandson. So the guy says, "Oh, the address is on the saddle. Just return it. You don't have to buy it." So Lionel takes the horse, and meanwhile, Sophia and Brandon hear a helicopter. It's Warren and Santana and a pilot. They have to keep turning back though because of the winds. So Sophia tries to signal them with her compact. Tells Brandon it worked, but it's not clear that it really worked the first time. Sophia's somewhat giving up hope when Lionel bursts in. But the horse has escaped during those few minutes.
So he can't get it back to the guy.
So they're all 3 trapped there now, but they hear the helicopter coming back because Warren had actually spotted Lionel on horseback. So Sophia hears the helicopter returning, and they all race out, and she signals them again with her mirror, and they lower down a rope with not a ladder, but a, I don't know what you call it, the little gurney that they strap Brandon into, and he gets pulled up, and Santana pulls him into the helicopter. So Brandon is safe, but the winds once again come up. The helicopter has to leave. So the last shot we see is of Sophia huddled against Lionel, and him with his arm around her, watching the helicopter leave as the flames surround them.
You can just imagine what Augusta would be making of that scene.
She would not be too happy. I feel like they are sort of hinting at Lionel and Sophia getting back together once this Augusta brick thing blows up.
Well, especially if CC continues to be in his coma for a while, and then he could wake up just in time for them to be having an affair again. So
and CC shouldn't care anyway because he's, ordered Sophia out of his life. So.
Yeah.
Although she is still living in the guest house, he'll be surprised to find out. So that is it for this episode. I think it was, a Monday episode, so I don't think Lionel and Sophia will die, but they may be rescued. So we had some more location shooting. Last week we got back to the ghost town, and we also had the location for Brick and Amy's wedding, and now there's the camp and the flames. The flames, which I presume are mostly stock footage, so we've got a few more of the actors getting to go on location.
They seem to have rented a little smoke machine or something for the set with Lionel and Sophia in the cabin, so we do get a little bit of that effect. Yeah,
actually, I assumed all the outdoor stuff was shot on location, but now that I'm thinking about it, perhaps some of the close-up stuff with flames and smoke in the background might actually have been done in the studio, because you have more control over the audio that way, and the wind too if you're going to be trying to blow smoke with things. So yeah, it's possible those last things were actually done in the studio, and Brandon was on location. We saw him get out of the car with Sophia, and Lionel was riding the horse, but yeah, there's probably a mix, but everything's bright orange and red thanks to the flames, so the footage matches pretty well. Yeah, I'm thinking Kirk's going to try and rush this wedding with Eden.
Definitely looks like he's going to try. Now, as I said, this could actually, I think, stretch out to the next sweeps. If Eden goes missing, if they have to try and find her, if there's a lot of stuff in between. We'll see.
And this week we had some credits. Very soon after the last one. Last time we had credits was last week on Wednesday. So I think we have all of our usual people in the main credits. And I still feel like the credits are 3 days ahead. Because there are people in the credits that we have not seen. And when I looked on IMDb, they actually will appear in 3 episodes. We've got Mechanic George, John Hostetter. We have Woman in Hall, Monica Lewis. That's not a spoiler, I hope. Judge's Secretary, Leah Jokey, which I'm assuming means she'll be a witness at the wedding of Kirk and Eden. And what I think is maybe a bit of a spoiler, Judge Raleigh is not listed as Judge Raleigh. So I won't say what he's actually listed as. Maybe there was a last-minute name change for his character, and the credits have the old name. But David Hooks is the actor who played Judge Raleigh, and he's listed as something else in 3 days.
Wow.
So I will reveal that. So I think we're still 3 days shifted on the credits. That's it for episode 342. We'll be back after we watch 343. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I mean, how many times are you going to slap yourself in the face with the same old fish?
Welcome back.
Hello.
We watched a Burke's Law yesterday from season 5, and Jed Allen was unfortunately he was the murder victim, so we only saw him for a few minutes, but someday we'll see him as C.C. Capwell. We watched episode 343 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Tuesday, December 3rd, 1985. So I guess this would have been my last week of school before it came time to start to study for my big 3 final exams, because I was only taking 3 courses. So I think I probably saw, once this weekend's, quite a few December 1985 episodes when they originally aired, because probably didn't study much based on the grades I got. Dylan does everything he can to spend more time with Kelly in this episode. Meanwhile, Kelly seems jealous of Janice and keeps looking at Dylan. So, very troubling feeling about this episode. It seems destined that Dylan and Kelly are going to be interested in each other. When they were alone, Kelly asked Dylan how things are going with Janice. And Dylan says, "You ask me that every time we're alone together." Why? That was how their conversation ended. So Kelly never answered that yet.
That is probably what all of the viewers are wondering at this point, too.
Janice realizes that Dylan is in love with Kelly and says she's going to LA to become a model and actress. She then runs into Pearl at Buzz's and tells him her whole story. Not mentioning Kelly's name, of course, but she tells him all about her boyfriend being in love with his brother's girlfriend. So I wonder if Pearl will put that together when he realizes who Janice is at some point. She also tells him she's going to LA to be an actress and model, and that she's going to be in the January issue as the centerfold of some magazine. I think she just said it was USA Magazine or something. Anyway, he says, well, usually here, I'll do my Pearl accent. Yeah, usually I can't do it. Flip through the magazines at the newsstand, but this time I'll buy it. Anyway, Pearl and Janice is another potential couple. Warren and Janice, and Pearl and Janice. Pearl and Warren. So anyway, just every time Janice runs into someone, we got to see who she's going to end up with next. So anyway, that's a possibility. Pearl needs a girl. Augusta arrives at the Capwells, and somehow is the first person to tell Gina that Brandon is surrounded by a raging fire. She freaks out, of course. Mason tells Augusta that Gina's on drugs again. Gina's a little annoyed that he's just spreading that around. Before Gina can freak out too much, though, Warren, Santana, and Brandon come in the door. This reminds me of something we talked about last night after we did the podcast. I don't know why Sophia and Lionel didn't just phone the Capwells from the office to say what was going on, and I don't know why Warren didn't radio in to the Capwells once they had Brandon to tell him what was going on. It seems like going all the way back to Santa Barbara before anyone, knows that Brandon's safe seems a bit, I don't know, irresponsible.
Well, I guess it's more dramatic this way. As we talked about, I guess last week, why didn't Nick and Dylan just print out another copy of the
Of the
photo
photo
from the negative.
negative. Will they ever think of that? Augusta worries about Sophia and Lionel spending the night together. She says to Warren, if the fire doesn't get him, Sophia will. And Warren says he doesn't think that's the case, and Augusta says, you don't know your father. Sophia and Lionel spend the night at the camp office. They actually have some lovely conversation the night before and in the morning. The horse returns, and they ride away.
I was relieved to see the horse return because I was thinking of that rancher who was probably going to be sitting around after this waiting for a phone call to get his horse.
Gina insults Santana's love for Brandon. She actually is not too happy, I think, that Santana's the one that brought Brandon home, and says, oh, if you ever did get custody of him, you'd just leave him again. Now, there wasn't actually any discussion with Mason on Santana's part, but my theory is that he's going to realize this would be the best way to get at Gina, is to help Santana get Brandon from him. So, although they were within a few feet of each other for much of the episode in the upstairs hallway, they never actually had that discussion. But Mason tells Gina that he will use the fact that she's on drugs again against her. Of course, she has no defense for that. But she says she'll do anything if he'll, drop that line of questioning. He tells her to tell Mary the truth as the first step towards her, making up for what she's done. So she does. She tells Mary everything, and Mary believes her. Mary says she already kind of knew most of it. But she still doesn't want to have anything to do with Mason. And so when Mason tries to approach her and she rebuffs him, Mason accuses Gina of not telling her the right thing and is once again angry with Gina. So I don't think Gina's going to get out of this. I think Mason is going to use those pills somehow. Then Gina also has an additional worry that he might have seen the wig while he was searching her room, and maybe he just hadn't put things together yet. So now she's got that to worry about. I think she ends up shoving it back in that drawer unit in the hallway. So, I mean, she really should have gotten rid of these things long ago. The pills and the wig. Then Mason comes up with an odd plan. I'm not quite sure what he's doing, but he's hidden a tape recorder in Cece's room, and he calls Gina in there to discuss the situation. Mm-hmm. So I guess he's going to try to get her to confess to something. Of course, she hasn't really been on drugs, so I don't see Gina confessing to that. And the fact is, there's a date on that pill bottle, and she's only used 4 or 5 pills. Like, she gave Eden 1. No, she's only used 3. She gave Eden 1 the first day and 2 the second time. So there's only 3 pills gone, and she's had them for over a month. So I think that alone is evidence that she hasn't been abusing them.
I suppose perhaps the issue is that she's not really supposed to have them at all.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, there's no kind of court order about that or anything like that. But.
No, and with Cece, out of commission, I don't think, he can use it against her in any way other than to try to say she's an unfit mother. But she can say, well, I took 3 within a month, so, that's not abnormal. And that's all that happened in this episode. But I'm interested to see exactly how Janice's storyline goes. I have no memory of any of the plot lines from 35 years ago for Janice, except I remember her last day on the show. That's all I remember between now and then. So, yeah, this will be all new and exciting to me, even though I'm pretty sure I must have seen it because, December I saw most of. Christmas I would have watched it. And come spring, when I moved to Vancouver, I'm pretty sure I spent a lot of days not going to classes and watching Santa Barbara from January to April of that year. Come May, of course, it's a different story. But I think for the next 5 months, I probably saw almost all the episodes. And I can't remember almost any of it. So that's it. We'll be back with the Wednesday episode after we watch number 344. See you then.
Bye.
Well, luckily, 85 was a good year for ginger ale.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 344 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Wednesday, December 4th, 1985. Another boring Brick and Amy day. Brick tells Amy over dinner that taking care of a house all day is a breeze. But we find out from flashbacks that he's been doing all kinds of crazy things, like hiding a broken vacuum and a spilled bag of vacuum contents just shoved into the closet, among other things. So at the very end of the episode, Amy opens the closet door and everything falls out. So that's just a episode where nothing happened and nothing interesting happened. Where is Marissa? Why is Brick the only one keeping the Perkins house for the last 2 days that we've seen?
I'm assuming maybe she is off visiting Jade, wherever Jade is. Maybe.
I don't remember a line saying that, but that makes the most sense, because otherwise she'd want to hang out with her grandson a little.
Well, yes, and I think she would want to say and how her house was being maintained and organized as well.
She'll come home and be somewhat shocked by what's been going on. So hopefully we'll see Marissa again soon. Ted doesn't have a storyline. Gets word that the camp has burned to the ground.
Ted and Warren are weirdly in a similar position in that they're there and they do play roles in other people's storylines, but neither of them really has one of their own right now.
They're basically just like Rosa. Ted tells Mason that the camp is burnt down, and Mason tells him not to assume the worst. He says Lionel spent his life getting out of tight spots. Kirk tells Ted that they'll soon be brothers-in-law, because he and Eden are getting married. Cruz walks out at this point. Kirk says he'll get over it. Ted and Mary are dumbfounded by the thought that Kirk and Eden are getting married. And then when Mason and Gina find out, they also can't believe it either. Cruz spends the episode trying to get into Kirk's apartment to talk to Eden. Little does he know that Eden's not there, and Kirk doesn't know where he is either. So he sends Pearl to break into Kirk's apartment. Pearl doesn't find Eden there, but the phone rings, and Pearl does a pretty good Kirk impression, I thought. No trace of his accent. And it was, of course, the guy that Kirk has sent out searching for Eden. And with some non-committal responses, Pearl manages to get to the guy to say that he hasn't had any luck finding Eden. So Pearl immediately calls Cruz from the payphone that we've conveniently started seeing in the hallway right outside Kirk's apartment. And Cruz, when Cruz gets there, he says to Pearl, "Is he back yet?" And he says, "Yep." And then they break into Kirk's apartment. And I think Pearl manages to keep Cruz from attacking Kirk again. But Cruz says, "If anything happens to Eden, I'll kill you." Are we setting up another murder mystery?
Well, I think Cruz is really getting farther and farther from his career on the police force, because I think Kirk he will be able to say that Cruz basically burst into his home uninvited and threatened him. So, and if he was really smart like Mason and had it all on tape, he would really have Cruz over a barrel. Yes,
that's true. Yeah, definitely sending Pearl to break into Kirk's place is not... he's already done it once, so I guess it's not any worse. But Kirk already knows that he had someone break into his place the last time, so... I don't know. I don't think Cruz is going to keep his job when all this is over. Warren and Santana are back in the helicopter and back up at Camp Salitas, Lake Salitas. and they hear the news that the camp has burned to the ground. Lionel and Sophia, of course, are on horseback at this point, but they find themselves in a boxed canyon with 200-foot cliffs. Luckily, they find a cabin, although, it could easily burn down, but they decide to hang out there and try and get some respite, I think, from the smoke. And what do you know? The horse escapes again. Lionel has not tied him up properly a second time. So now they're stuck in this cabin in a different location from where everyone's looking for them. And they have a lovely time. They reminisce about when they met and their time in Hollywood, when they were first dating before Sophia found out he was married to Augusta. And then they fall asleep in each other's arms.
Oh, the whole time I was watching them have this lovely time in the middle of a fire, I was thinking of our not lovely time visiting your dad in the middle of a fire. And really, when you're sitting there and there's smoke everywhere and you're trying to breathe, it's actually not a time when you're probably romantically thinking about your good times together.
Yeah. You're just trying to get your podcast done and go back to sleep.
And making plans to pack and leave as quickly as possible the next morning.
Yep. So they fall asleep just as the sound of helicopters is heard, and it looks like they did not hear them. So maybe Warren will say, hey, there's a cabin, let's check it out. But I feel like this may be a step to Lionel and Sophia, especially if, what Augusta did to Brick comes out and Lionel is disgusted by her actions.
Yeah, I think that's going to play a big role, because I think for Lionel that will be kind of the last straw, because we've kind of seen it building a bit over the last few months that, Augusta's been really pushing it, and I think she really pushed things a lot in the wrong direction when she objected so much to Brandon and is now continuing to object to him. And so I think that pushed things quite far. And then I think when Lionel finds out what she's done to Brick, it's going to be really devastating to their marriage.
Mm-hmm. Mason records Gina's confession, but then he spots Marion, wanders out of the room. Gina doesn't just confess a few things. It turns out she confesses everything, including pulling the plug on Cece and framing Eden. But Mason's in the hallway, being rebuked by Mary. So Mason comes back in and says, okay, let's start your confession. And Gina says, what? I'm not going through that again. So Mason threatens her with the pills again and pulls them out, and she bites his arm, causing him to drop the pills, and she crushes them underfoot. But Mason says, well, I can just, go to the pharmacist and get him to sign a statement, so that's not a problem. The important thing is this tape recording of your confession that I have, which shocks Gina. And then for the next little while, Mason is taunting her about her drug addiction, and it slowly dawns on Gina that Mason hasn't listened to the tape yet, because she did not confess to any kind of drug addiction. So then she thinks that I've got to get that tape before Mason listens to it.
Now, if Mason is really smart, he'll have a copy of that tape socked away in a security box somewhere. But
do you think Gina will get the tape before Mason listens to it?
Yeah, well, it's possible if they want to drag the storyline a bit farther, because we probably have a lot of ground to cover, I would think, with Eden being implicated in it. So I wouldn't necessarily...
If Mason listened to it, would he turn it into Cruz, or would he think,
could use it as leverage.
Keep this as leverage over Gina, but also this way Eden will still be out of my hair, because if Eden's cleared, they're back to fighting about the company.
Well, so it does have the potential to maybe, again, almost form a bit of an uneasy alliance with Gina. And, the other thing that hasn't really come to light yet, which I assume will eventually, because it has been referenced at various points since the beginning of the show, is whatever Mason was cooking up with his mother. So, at some point I'm expecting that to bubble up again and someone to use that as leverage over Mason. So whether it'll be in this context or in another storyline, I don't know.
Almost a year and a half since the show started. The other thought I had, to really do a round robin with the tape. Maybe Brandon's new radio that we saw him with has a tape player, and he borrows the tape and records some music over it, but doesn't completely record over it, something like that. So the tape could be like a MacGuffin for a while, that it gets chased around, maybe unknowingly, by various people. Maybe Ted borrows it to record a lecture, and we lose track of where it is, and it shows up unexpectedly at an inopportune moment. So
the show actually has a really interesting relationship, I think, with technology. So we saw very cleverly, we've talked about this before, Nick using his camera and taking pictures of the map. So he's got endless copies. But then that whole element is kind of dropped when everyone seems to forget that pictures produce negatives. And then we saw earlier Gina with the tape recorder and hiring actors and very cleverly splicing everything together to create a message for Eden to hear and to lure her to the house. And then, of course, that whole thing went flat when Eden didn't actually end up listening to the message. So with this, I feel like maybe this is something where, Mason's got this tape, but I think that, like everything else, could go flat, either because the writers forget it basically as a plot element, or, as you say, it just goes sideways somehow.
Well, we had some credits in this episode. Just the normal cast credits. I was browsing YouTube yesterday, because people are always posting old shows from the 50s and 60s, and I try to grab them before they get pulled by the copyright holder, so I can watch them at a later date. And I came across, what's it called? Space Patrol? No. Sky Patrol?
Space Academy.
Space Academy. And I don't remember if I'd ever seen it, but it was only 15 episodes, and I thought it would be fun to watch on Saturday mornings. And just as I was checking an episode to see what the quality was, I happened to freeze on what's his name? Ty Henderson in the credits, who of course plays Sam. And I was shocked because, Diane, you apparently had watched Space Academy, yet you didn't remember your favorite character was playing Sam.
Well, I remember my favorite character was Commander Gampu, who is actually played by the fellow from Lost in Space.
Jonathan Harris, is it?
And the female lead in it is Pamela Ferdinand, I think her name is, who was quite well known as a child actor, I think, back in the 60s and 70s. And she's actually in quite a well-known episode of the original Star Trek. As a child actor, so. And
while we're talking about actors, I watched another Locker Room episode this time. It was a Generations reunion. And I found out that Nancy Sorrell, who was one of the sisters of Generations, actually moved to Canada and has been acting in Canada. So, could well have run into her in the streets of Vancouver at some point. That's about it for Wednesday episode. We will be back after we watch the Thursday episode, number 345. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Well, Dad, looks like your wife's back on the pills.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We watched episode 345 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Thursday, December 5th, 1985. Ted indicates that Warren called him to tell him that he spotted Lionel's horse running loose. So they are aware of the situation thanks to that horse. Callie thinks it would be a good idea to go look for Sophia. Luckily, saner heads talk her out of going into a raging fire and messing up the firefighters. It's funny because you hear about all these nuts who screw up firefighters' plans with these fires that we have when they refuse orders.
Yeah, you're always hearing about homeowners who won't leave or campers who decide that this is the perfect time to go into the bush while no one else is there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think actually in some cases they can be fined or prosecuted for hampering efforts. So.
Mm-hmm. So they talk Kelly out of that. Nick has a book meeting in San Francisco, but he can't get a flight. So Kelly says, oh, take the Capwell jet. But when she calls George, George says, well, we have a jet, but we don't have a pilot. And Kelly thinks, wait, Dylan, do you know how to fly a jet? And he says, yes. And I started having PTSD, so...
He kept saying Santa Rosa over and over
I
again
know.
for some reason.
Luckily, they're going to San Francisco, so it should be okay. So they all get to the airfield, and Nick gets a call saying he's got to rush back for some other job, and he's the only one who can do it. So Kelly says, "Oh, just send Dylan to your publisher in San Francisco." But of course, Nick says, "Well, Dylan doesn't know anything about the book. I should send you." And Kelly does not want to be in a jet alone with Dylan, and she declines, but realizes that's messing everything up for Nick, so she then promptly agrees to go. Next thing you know, Dylan is flirting with Kelly as he flies her to San Francisco.
And flirting with his plane.
And flirting with his plane. Thought we had more time. The fire gets closer to the cabin, and Lila and Sophia fear they're going to die. They kiss. Who knows what else they'll do in between episodes before they get found, before Augusta walks in.
Well, they should be getting pretty close to losing oxygen in that soon, so...
They shouldn't try to disrobe in that environment.
Yeah.
Eden tells Ted and Kelly that yes, she is marrying Kirk Cranston, and later Cruz finds her at the beach house, and she confirms the same thing. And he keeps trying to prompt her to say that she doesn't love Kirk, and finally she blurts out, "I do love him." Now, none of this is convincing at all to any of us. I think Eden really is just marrying Kirk just to get away from Cruz, and I think it's because she realizes that it would mess up his whole career and life to be covering for her, and knowing that she pulled the plug on Cece. She's pretty much decided this is a good course of action, and will kind of put her on hold, really, by marrying Kirk. I think that's how she's seeing it. When she gets home, Kirk is happy to see her, but she's a bit surprised that he's bought her a wedding dress, and plans for them to be married today. And he says, is there any reason not to? And I guess when she realizes that the whole point of it is just to be put on hold, she says, I guess there's not. So Judge Raleigh, unfortunately, can't make it. So he has suggested a justice of the peace that he knows out in the middle of nowhere in the back of a grocery store. So he kind of says, I kind of hoped Ted and Kelly could be there, but I guess it doesn't matter. So
she's sort of the most unhappy, almost zombie bride ever.
And Kirk's quite the opposite. He's very enthused about the whole thing. And at the Justice of the Peace, he says, I'm really going to take these vows seriously. And, I hope this is going to be an amazing life for us. Cruz decides to put an end to this and bursts in to Judge Raleigh's office, where, of course, there is no wedding. His secretary tries to kick him out, but Cruz pulls his badge and says, I need to know where that wedding is taking place. And since Judge Raleigh's office is the ones that suggested the Justice of the Peace, she knows exactly where to send Cruz, and we see him driving like mad over dirt roads to get there.
I have to say, Cruz was quite snippy with the poor girl in the little chapel he went to first, and was, making all these sort of snide remarks about her not giving him the information fast enough. And I kept thinking, my goodness, if he was asking it of me, he would be having a complete meltdown, because I don't move that fast on anything. I thought she did a very good job. So
You think he'll make it in time to stop the wedding?
Well, I think it would be... They'll definitely play it out, I think. I feel like they'll play it out a bit to, the time thing.
We'll see a ceremony.
Yeah.
I guess Kirk, although he wants it over quick, I think he wants it memorable. So he'll probably out for the long one, not expecting Cruz to burst in.
Yeah, I think he'll either get there just in time, either way, just in time to see her say her vows and, sign. Really, it's not legal, I would guess, until you sign the thing. But, and I'm sure for drama they'd have it just after she says I do, and the judge says they're married. Or he'll get there just in time to prevent it.
I think I read somewhere once that in California, once the people have verbally said I do, it's legally binding.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because I think there's a future wedding that has, in Santa Barbara, that has a similar thing. But I don't think we're aware of that rule. So that's really all that happened. I really compressed it. I mean, I guess you can just imagine Sophia and Lionel in that cabin for a whole episode, but really, basically, they reminisced and hugged and talked about dying.
I kept thinking of just what it would be like to be in that smoke and dirt and everything.
Just trying to breathe. Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I would really be saying anything. I'd be trying to conserve my oxygen. You'd probably be so hot and miserable and dusty in real life.
Yes. So, will they or won't they? It's a question for two of our couples. And three of our couples. Will they or won't they? And that is it for a Thursday episode. We had credits again. They had some extra time to run credits. The same main cast. No mention of the other person playing Cece. And no name change yet for Eden. She's still Eden Capwell. And we get the same 4 people credited that were mistakenly credited 3 episodes ago. So I think they finally realized that their credits were 3 days ahead because of the preemptions from October, or maybe even September. So we finally see Mechanic George in this episode, Woman in Hall, who lives across from Kirk and tells Cruz that they're getting married, Judge's Secretary, who tells Cruz where they're getting married, and Justice of the Peace, who I didn't actually see because I was typing. I don't think he was on for very long. But he's credited as David Hooks, which is interesting because I have Judge Raleigh being played by David Hooks. So I'm wondering if it is the same actor or if there's an error. We'll compare them. And maybe he's playing Judge Raleigh's brother. So. And that's it for the Thursday episode. So it should be an exciting Friday. We'll have a wedding and an exciting business meeting in San Francisco. And possibly Lionel and Sophia will be rescued, but probably not before they do something that Augusta will be very angry with. We'll watch episode 346, and we'll see you then. Bye.
Bye-bye.
It is. It's hell to have things unsaid and unfinished.
I didn't even tell the paperboy this time.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We've finished episode 346 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Friday, December 6th, 1985. So I think that would have been my last day of school, and now just finals for the next few weeks. Cruz arrives at the general store, but encounters 2 police officers that Kirk has cleverly put in the reception area of the Justice of the Peace section of the general store. And they have a fist fight for about half the episode. Meanwhile, Kirk and Eden are getting married inside. And when Cruz finally bursts in, he insists that Eden finish the ceremony while he's watching, which she does. And Kirk and Eden are married.
And I have to say, this little scene when he's watching them getting married, there's actually some very fine acting, I thought, amongst all 3 of the actors to really sell the scene.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you really get the sense that Eden's just marrying Kirk because she just really doesn't think she has any other option. After the wedding, of course, Cruz is arrested, and he has to call Julia to bail him out. Julia doesn't really have a storyline now that Kirk's not a potential love interest anymore, so she's just helping Brick and now Cruz, and what else is she working on? Probably some tension with Augusta, I would think. That's all she's got currently.
Yeah, I think we can almost think of Julia and Warren and Ted as being the NPC characters of this show right now.
What other love interests could there be for Julia? Who else is single? We've got Sam, and we've got Pearl. So we'll see if she clicks with any of them. Or maybe they will introduce someone else for Julia at some point.
Pearl actually has more of a storyline than any of the three characters we've just mentioned. I mean, at least he's stolen some shoes and is preparing for a date.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I guess, I mean, it seems like they introduced Pearl for a reason, not just as a, one-off, snitch for this boat trip out to Carlo's yacht. So we'll see what other things the writers have in store for him, maybe backstory-wise. Kirk tells Eden that on their way to Paris for their honeymoon, they'll stop over for dinner at the World Trade Center. I did not know the World Trade Center had a laudable restaurant on the roof. Just kind of like a zombie throughout this whole thing. He's bought her a negligee to wear, and he kisses her, and she says, remember I said I would need some time? So she kind of blows him off on having an actual honeymoon, although she does let him carry her over the threshold in the hotel room.
I have to say it's quite notable throughout this episode how completely unenthused every other character is about Kirk and Eden's marriage.
Mm-hmm. But Kirk is over the moon.
Well, I think he got her over the finish line, which is what he was really wanting. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Mason made some comment at some point about that, cementing his position in the company, which Kirk claims not to have thought of, but I don't know. Kirk Cranston. Imagine this story would have been the storyline with Jack Lee. If he had stayed in, alive, maybe Jack and Eden would be married now.
I think there would have been a lot more fireworks around that, though, given his past history with Julia and his history with the Capwell family, and I think that would have been a lot more fireworks. I think they were really setting Jack up to be quite a crackerjack kind of almost evolving, maybe not an evil, straight out evil character, but like a Victor Newman kind of character.
I think maybe that's right. Julia did make some comment, maybe in the last episode, to Kirk, that sort of probably could have been for Jack as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Kelly and Dylan can't land in San Francisco due to the fog. I find this very believable because of our experiences of trying to fly from Santa Barbara to San Francisco.
Yeah, that is not something we would ever repeat because neither of those airports are located in an ideal place for actually taking off or landing. Yeah.
Instead, they divert to Santa Rosa. You may have remembered me shuddering at the Santa Rosa incident when I mentioned it about 2 years ago. And I think we've marched headlong into that situation. But that's not the most horrible phrase that's ever said on Santa Barbara. I have in this envelope written down a word that when you hear it, you might agree with me. It's the worst word ever said on Santa Barbara. I'll give you custody of that.
Okay.
And when they say it in an episode, I'll have you open it and see if you agree that it's It'll make you shudder in several different ways.
Is it Kellen?
Kellen. I don't think they had that in those days.
No.
But you're on the right track. They check into a motel at the airport in Santa Rosa so they can be near the plane and rush off to San Francisco if the weather changes. After some very brief contemplation, I think Dylan realizes he'd better sleep on the plane to avoid accidentally sleeping with Kelly. Kelly orders a pizza at the motel, and it's a large. I'm thinking, oh, is Kelly planning to eat a large pizza herself? Well, she brings it to the plane so that Dylan can have dinner, and in hopes that they might accidentally sleep together. That's what I'm thinking. Accidents could happen on a plane in Santa Rosa. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Augusta and Julia arrive at the Capwell mansion to wait for Sophia and Lionel. As you remember, Warren and Santana had radioed ahead that a couple had been found on the road and had been rescued. Well, when Warren and Santana arrive, it's revealed that the couple that was rescued were not Sophia and Lionel. They're still back in that cabin, doomed to die. And several times during the rest of the episode, people call to see about getting a helicopter or a plane in, but the winds are always still too high to go back in. Augusta is clearly annoyed by this. She's wearing a red leather outfit in this episode. So she did not verge into the territory of being worried that Sophia and Lionel were alone together. She's actually scared for Lionel's life at this point and has sort of backburnered her worry for Sophia and Lionel being together, at least for the few scenes we saw in this episode.
I'm sort of almost wondering if she's hoping that, maybe Sophia's already perished in this fire and there's still hope for Lionel.
Maybe. She and Julia arrived together, but they didn't really have much discussion about it. Once Warren arrives, Augusta is basically chatting with Warren. Because I think Julia had to, she had to go and help bail out Cruz, so she had to leave at some point. So I think we'll just wait for the inevitable to happen in that storyline. I imagine without Cece there, Augusta didn't get kicked out of the mansion as quickly as she would have been. Gina manages to steal the tape recorder during one of Mason's, because Mason's working in the atrium, unexpectedly, and he's up and down, as people come in and as he tries to make calls to get a helicopter in, and he's taken off his jacket and put it on his chair, and that's where Gina slips the tape recorder out, and Gina does something that surprised me, which once it happened, I remembered, of course, it all came flooding back, but I did not remember this. She actually plays back the tape and edits the tape. She finds a good point to, stop her original confession and then tapes over a new ending with a much less horrible confession, which is that she is a drug addict. She says, oh, yes, I take one in the morning and one in the evening, so I guess I am a drug addict. And she does it with that joyous feeling that she sometimes delivers her lines in, even though she is dooming herself in some way, but obviously it's better than the original confession that she pulled the plug on Cece and set up Eden.
I thought there were kind of two notable things about this. First of all, the point where she actually steals the tape recorder is when all of the hubbub is happening around the front door, and they announce that it was not, in fact, Sophia and Lionel who were rescued. And so this is actually a very traumatic moment for everyone, and it kind of shows what a completely different plane Gina's on, that she's not at all interested in any of that. She's just zeroed right in on the tape and her opportunity to take it. And the other thing, of course, I was also surprised by her action. She seems to feel that this is a better course to take, to pretend to be a drug addict and put it on the tape, but doesn't seem to foresee that this may also lead to a poor resolution for her in another way.
Yeah, I wonder if she did or didn't. It's an interesting to maybe we'll find out why she made this decision.
Yeah.
Mason then finally listens to the tape and has some papers drawn up and calls both Gina and Santana in and says, Santana, I think it's the day you've been waiting for, or something like that. And he's drawn up papers that he's going to file with the judge to have custody of Brandon taken away from Gina for being an unfit mother. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it just seems odd that Gina wouldn't have thought this would be what he was talking about.
Yeah.
So, I don't think he really needs the confession, though, since he has the pills, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe that's why she thought she's not losing anything. Mason already said he was going to subpoena the pharmacy. Maybe Gina figures this confession is not actually making things worse for her, because Mason's already got that evidence, and it's not like she can say, oh, I'm not a drug addict, and make it any better, because it's not going to mitigate what Mason's found. You know, my thought of the number of pills she's taken could have been proven before she crushed that underfoot. So yeah, maybe she thought it's not actually going to get any worse, and this will get her off the hook with her accidental confession.
Yeah, I just feel like if they're having a hearing about this, in playing the tape and, you know, just the impact of her own words.
I just feel like it wouldn't be admissible. I think she'll maybe get Juliet to say, listen, there's this tape. Can you just make sure it doesn't show up at the hearing? I'm willing to hold my own against this prescription, you know. But maybe something like that.
Maybe.
I've got no memory of it, so it'll be interesting to see. I don't know if maybe Santana briefly gets custody of Brandon, or maybe she gets it for the rest of the show. I really don't remember.
Or if it's some kind of test of Mason, maybe there's some sort of a play there with Mason she's doing. I don't know.
It'll be interesting to see. This is one of the storylines I'm interested in, partly because Santana's finally back, and she's finally, you know, since those promos, she's coming to Santa Barbara to get her son back right from the beginning. You know, that's one of the things people have been presumably rooting for. So I'm excited about that, even though I love Gina.
I'm actually quite enjoying this particular incarnation of Santana as well.
I think it's now our third or fourth episode.
Yeah.
Next week, a cast member is leaving. Any guesses?
Is it a big one or a small one?
It's a big one this time.
Well, I do have one thought. It may not be this particular cast member, but I remember a few podcasts ago you were talking about an interview you had read somewhere with, what was his name, Jed Allen, where he was talking to Charles Bateman at a Christmas party, and Charles Bateman was telling him about his role in Santa Barbara. Mm-hmm. And I remember you telling me that story a while ago, or maybe hearing it on the cruise. But I remember the other part of that story was that what Charles Bateman didn't know during that conversation was that Jed Allen had actually already been offered the role of C.C. Capwell. And so, actually, Charles Bateman was already off Santa Barbara at that point.
Interesting. Well, if that's the case, perhaps we've already seen Charles Bateman's last episode, since he hasn't been playing C.C. for the last week. So, we will see, because IMDb is not necessarily accurate. So, we may be seeing Charles Bateman again. We may not. But it's actually someone else who's leaving next week.
Oh, well, that's really exciting. I have no idea who.
All right, we will find out by Tuesday, actually. But first, we have to watch the Monday episode, number 347, from December 9th, 1985. We'll see you next week for week 72 of Santa Barbara.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Where there's a way, there's a will.